We'll use this time now to acknowledge that this production takes place on the unceded territories of the Squamish, the Tsleil-Waututh, and the Musqueam people.
Our intention for this podcast is to provide a space where survivors can share with us their lived experiences and what it was like for them to navigate health and wellness after residential school.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Woven Spirit, Threads of Wisdom. My name is Teka Desjarlais. I'm Soto and Mohawk, and I was born and raised here on these territories. Today I'm joined by my guest, Bruce.
My name is Bruce Allan. I come from the Stellat'en First Nation. It's west, 160 kilometers west of Prince George. And I am from the Beaver Clan. And my father clan is the Frog Clan, so I'll probably talk a bit about my father as we go. And intergenerational survivor because of my grandmother and my father attended LEJAC, and a survivor because I did attend as a day scholar. So it's my experience is a bit different than being a resident. So, but I'll talk a bit about that later. Yeah.
Well, thank you. So I wanted to jump right in and ask you, how do you think that intergenerational relationships contribute to a stronger and more resilient community?
Growing up in my community, what I remember the most were the elders who quite often spoke in our language, and they did not speak English. They would just speak in their language and address the community, and there were certain speakers that were appointed to be they would announce different events and in our language. And the events I remember were the funerals, and at the graveyards they would stand and talk for several minutes about the individual, and then say that there's a ceremony that would be following. But I think that thinking back, I know the other children who were being raised by their grandparents. And when I see them today, they're the ones that are the knowledge keepers of today's generation. So that tradition is what I remember fondly of those elders. And that connection with the younger generations was that you were groomed into being that knowledge keeper from a very young age. So we have people in our community we say, it translates to grandma raised. So if they were raised by their grandparents, then they were the ones that were the keepers of the knowledge, and you didn't have to introduce them as such, but that was their given role.
What particular traditions or practices from your community do you feel are important that the young generations today should uphold?
I think the bathlats or potlatch is one of our traditional ceremonies in our community that's 24/7. It's with you every day. You belong to a clan, you're born into a clan. And so you follow your mother, and so we're very matrilineal, and there's words in our language that say when you mention a guy or a girl, it's the same word. So there's that equality in our language that speaks to that. Women were held higher. as sacred life givers, but more respect for women. We're matrilineal, and when the Europeans came, they had a patrilineal perspective, and that was imposed on our people, and it clashed with our culture because they did not have the same views of women as our society did. And they were looked down upon by the patrilineal ideas, and that was kind of forced upon our people with the Indian Act and whatnot. But yeah, the potlatch needs to be, it will always be there. The traditions, the teachings will adapt to today's ideas, culture, the ideas of sharing what we have, all of what we have with other clan members. Other clan members are respected as guests and as witnesses to any transactions or major events in our community, such as funerals, name given, memorials. Those sorts of ceremonies are still practiced today, and the values behind the ceremonies will always be there. I was mentioning earlier that 100 years ago we didn't have Costco and Superstore and Save On Foods. Our food came from the land, and so our ceremonies were based on those items that we got from the land. Today we've adapted that, and we do use Costco and all of these other grocery stores. And if it ever got shut down, we only have 3 days of stuff to get from the stores, and where do we go from there?
So would you say that it's important how would you describe the importance of these traditions sort of becoming more accessible in today's society?
We see a lot of examples of that today. We have young people taking on traditional names for their clans, so they become hereditary chiefs, and we make sure that research is done on a name, and the family member that's taken on a name is in line to do that. So there's protocols and rules that are followed today, and young people are actually coming in to take on those names. And we had a young lady who was 15 at the time, and she requested her grandparents host a potlatch so that she can get a name. And today she holds that name for the Frog Clan, and it's a hereditary chief name. So she paid for that name through a potlatch, and she's an entertainer. I think she lives down here, I'm not quite sure, somewhere New Westminster or something, and she sings in a rock band, and she's a mother, and so she does all these things aside from being a parent. So we have those teachings going to the young people, and they see examples of that, and so I think that's something that will carry on. We need other clan members, other clans to also participate, because there's a lot of names that are traditional names that are dormant since the last person that held it has passed on, and families haven't really moved to get those names active again. And our system teaches respect, and it's all about respect for not only for themselves but for other people. And when we have a ceremony, the other clans, there's a host clan, which would be the person, or if we say the host clan will host the funeral for one of its members, and the other clan members will be witnesses. So every time they're paid to sit as a witness, they're obligated to pay attention to what's been done, so they're paid with food, groceries, and gifts and things like that. So they have a responsibility. Being a witness is a huge responsibility. Yeah.
Can you speak to the importance of carrying on these traditional names?
It's connected to the ancestors. It's connected to the spirit world. So our ceremonies are spiritual, and if somebody's taken on a name, that name's been held in the past by ancestors that passed many years ago, have held that name, and it's just been passed down to family members who are going to inherit it and live up to those names. And it's really important. The teachings are really important to carry on. So I think it'll be there for a while. It'll adapt to what's happening. A lot of times we see ceremonies on Facebook now, Facebook Live and things like that. So that was never done in the past, but we see these things happening, and our ceremonies are quite long, not as long as they used to be, but they're anywhere from 8 to 10, 12 hours. So imagine sitting in a chair for 12 hours, and you're paid to be a witness, so you're obligated to do that.
So for, let's say, community members who are disconnected, where is a good place to go to start learning about history?
I think once the communities know that our children are out there, they know that they're in foster care, and they know a lot of them been scooped, and so making an effort to track where they are and to invite them to come to participate. They will not get those teachings otherwise, unless it comes from their family members. And today I see our communities making strides in making sure that those children are given the teachings from where they come from. So that's the start, but we still have a long ways to go. And a lot of the young people, they were raised up in foster care, not knowing who they are and where they come from, and making that reconnection is the community's responsibility. And to make sure that that they're not standing alone, that there's support. They have family support, they have clan support, and there's that connection, like I said, with the spirit world. And so the ancestors are always watching us and I don't know, helping us out in different ways, I guess. Yeah.
So I wanted to ask you if you have you heard of the expression "come as you are"? Come as you are.
Okay.
Have you heard of that expression? When you hear it, what does it mean to you?
I think it's that thought just occurred to me. Come as you are, just accepting who you are, where you are at that moment, and it's an invitation to say, you're quite welcome here no matter what. And I think that would apply to the intergenerational survivors out there. To a lot of us don't really know our connections to other communities. I recently attended a funeral of my auntie who comes from a different community that we haven't really visited for a while, and it was a sad procession because my auntie was in her 80s and she passed suddenly, and my mom and my auntie are the same generation and they're first cousins, but there was no real connection from the past because there was a distance that separated everybody. But we were introduced at the funeral as our northern relatives, and everybody welcomed us. So, come as you are, whoever you are, whatever your background, people learn about you and learn a connection to you. And I think that's what that would mean to me. Yeah.
Oh, that's beautiful. How can we encourage maybe more young people to take on leadership roles in community? I see a lot of hesitation. Maybe folks don't feel that it's maybe their culture. They just haven't been introduced to it yet. And so I'm curious about how do we encourage people to take on something like that, like reconnecting and getting involved in community initiatives for reconnecting?
Yeah, just encouraging communities to accept people that are in today's terms would be off reserve, right? And we do have a lot of people like that, but they're relatives. I think just saying you're a relative and looking at the genealogy background of individuals, and it's pretty neat to connect people that are from similar families and seeing how they're related. So encouraging them to become leaders, I think we would have to model it, and through our potlatch system we have to model the hereditary chiefs as leaders, and that the children need to be trained and groomed to take on those leadership roles in the clan system. You have to, if you're taking on a traditional hereditary chief name, there's a lot of things that you cannot do. There's rules and unspoken rules, but there's lots of rules that you have to follow, and but you have to encourage them to take on those roles as a leader, hereditary chief leader, and that's not speaking about the Indian Act chosen leaders or the chiefs and councils and things like that. It's way different, and the responsibilities are not just for the Indian Reserve. It's for people and families and clans and communities.
So how can one balance personal life while actively staying involved in community, especially when the work that we may be doing is quite heavy?
Yeah, you have to make an effort to take care of yourself. You're being exposed to a lot of people's stories, pains, traumas, and you have to have elders to talk to, traditional medicine people to talk to. At a moment's notice, I have a lot of people on my phone call list that I check in and say how I'm doing and how are they doing, and they're traditional healers, and And, you know, they'll talk to you and they'll listen to you. Even if they have 2 hearing aids, they'll listen to you. But yeah, so just being connected to those traditional healers. Self-care is really important, physically, taking in food, and so mentally, spiritually, taking care of your emotions. That's really important. That's what I look to do whenever I get a chance. One of them is going out to hit something white on the golf course. So, just self-care is really important.
So, specifically to you, what does self-care, like what does taking care of yourself look like on a day-to-day basis?
Food, making sure I eat properly. I'm a diabetic, so that's a constant. That's got sugar. That, you know, just looking out for making sure I eat properly and stay away from the things that affect our people so much. Everybody likes to eat macaroni and cheese and things like that. So just being conscious of what we eat, and if I can have wild meat all the time, that's where I'll go. If I can eat fish, I'll eat fish. And you know, seafood. I think that's just self-care like that, and being conscious of not just sitting around and watching TV. Get up and walk for 15 minutes or after a meal or something. So just being physically active, and that's something that I was doing quite regularly when I was younger. Until I had a fallen arch on my right ankle.
Oh no!
My right foot had a fallen arch, and before the fallen arch, I ran 3 marathons. Yeah.
That is impressive. Yeah. Wow. I mean, not the collapsed arch, but
yeah. But that's what slowed me down. I can't do long distance running anymore. But that was kind of a meditation time when you do longer runs, 4 or 5 hours of running. So you're in your own headspace and your own thoughts and working things out and getting it out.
So you briefly mentioned about your injury that changed the way that you take care of yourself a little bit. Were there any other notable, I guess, examples that you noticed that you had to adapt your self-care routine?
Well, doing a fasting ceremony with the sweat lodge and things like that. I did a fasting ceremony, and for the medicine man, I asked him if I could have protection and the ability to work with survivors and intergenerational survivors, so that I'm not affected by, not so much not affected, but if I get angry or sad or take on those emotions that of the storyteller, that you know, they're sharing a lot of hurts and pains, that I don't take those on. I think that's what I fasted for, to work with survivors. So spirituality is really very important about self-care. Regardless of what it is, pray in your own way.
I want to know, when did you start your spiritual journey, as post-residential school?
When I was born.
So it started.
I would say that I started my healing journey when I was born.
Of course.
Because my grandmother went through residential school, so I inherited a lot of traumas from from my dad, and colonization in general.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of trauma that we inherit and we're born with, and so we're always healing around that.
Mm-hmm.
So really started to work on myself in 1992 when a counselor, Indigenous counselor, came to my community. Bill Mussel from Stellat'en was one of those people that came and did workshops on residential school, and it's the first time I ever seen it being done, and I thought, I think that's something I should be looking at, because a lot of people at that time were not speaking about their experiences at all. But they were sure showing it. My dad was like that, never spoke of it, but he showed it. He did a lot of drinking, a lot of chain smoking, and was quite violent to my mom, and so I witnessed a lot of that, grew up with a lot of that, the violence in our community. The survivors at that time, that was their way of coping, was through drinking, and every household was doing that. Every household was going through the very same violence, and that died off with a lot of those survivors, because the drinking killed them physically, whether it was in accidents or cirrhosis or things like that took them. And it was, the big question was always, why did our people drink? My dad was killed on the highway, and that's what I asked, why was he on a highway? Why, because he was drinking. Why did he drink was the big question. And that's what Bill Mussel really got me to think about, and that's started my journey of working with more survivors, because I would hear a lot of their stories. And I think it's important for the children and the grandchildren to hear those stories, because like I said, my dad never spoke of any of what happened to him, but I know because of the work that I did in residential schools. I worked on the IEP process, and a lot of the testimonies from survivors, and some of those testimonies were people that my dad went to school with, and he was in the same dormitory as them, and so they shared the brutal physical and sexual assaults that they went through, and I knew my dad was not immune to that. And so that was healing for me, because I got to hear what actually happened and who the perpetrators were. So it was healing for me. So I think, children and grandchildren need to know why their grandparents are the way they are, or their parents are the way they are, or the way they were in most cases.
And so, from your perspective, does compassion need to be taught for the young people to, have an understanding of, what their grandparents, what their parents have gone through? Is compassion something that can be taught, do you think?
I think maybe empathy.
Empathy?
Yeah. I didn't understand why my dad was the way he was, and why he was violent, why he was drinking, and it had a lot to do with what happened to him in residential school, that at the time survivors just would not share. And it's too hard to share about the sexual abuse that happened to the men or to the boys and to the girls, and the older students on the younger students, that sort of thing. So, it gave me a better understanding of the behaviors that came later, and just having that aha. That's why he drank the way he drank, and that's why he was violent. And even though he wasn't a violent man, when he used alcohol, all of that came out. And so just a better understanding. I know that when we have survivors, intergenerational survivors, and there's a lot of issues in our communities today that we're still reeling from. And the children and grandchildren are left wondering, why were they like that, or why did they do that? And that needs to happen, and not to say that they can forgive for everything. They can forgive, but they'll unforgive. But it's everybody's on a healing journey, and I'm still on a healing journey. I'm still looking at all of those things, and religion is a big one. Even though I was born into a Catholic system, I'm not going to follow that. And I have kind of more resentment for that system than anything else. I'm more of a Indigenous spirituality person, but I have to learn to accept that other people will follow the Catholic Church. And to me, my perspective is they're brainwashed, and you see that in our community when you say you have an open-end prayer, and everybody automatically goes into start blessing themselves. And we still have people that believe strongly, and you have to love them where they're at, and just accept that that's where they are. And you can't force your own beliefs on them, and but you'll find like-minded survivors out there, like-minded survivors who believe the same things as you do, and you make a good connection. And you feel more supported that there's other people that think like you, and you kind of debrief with each other, and that's healing too. What do you call it? Clergy abuse, or is that how you? That's how I think our people are, and that needs to be taught to the younger generation too.
What activities can bring the generations together and start conversations around healing?
Storytelling, I think just a traditional storytelling, learning about our culture from our territories, and not so much the traumas until the children get older. But I know I've listened to a lot of trauma stories right from the very young age, and observing a lot of trauma myself. But I know a lot of survivors would share trauma stories. One of my uncles went to the Second World War, and he was severely affected because he had to kill a bunch of German teenagers who had machine guns, and if he didn't kill them, they would have killed him. And he never raised a finger against children, even though he went to a residential school. And when he came back from the war, he just loved children. He would never lift a finger to hurt them. And I know that because my cousin and I were in his car outside of a bar in Fraser Lake, and he was going to give us a ride home, and he said, "Oh, I'm just going to have a couple of beers and I'll drive you home." And then he goes, "Here's the keys, you can listen to the radio." And And so my cousin and I, we took turns turning on the car, putting it in reverse and then putting it back. Except my cousin put it in reverse and gunned it. And it went backwards and there was a pickup truck going by and he hit it.
Oh no.
Smashed into it, and the guy gets out and he goes, "Oh, he's going to pay for this." And so I went into and waved my uncle to the door and I said, "You got to come outside." You got to come outside. And he goes, and my uncle goes, Holy crap. The chief's car knocked the crap out of the white man's car. That's all he said, and you know, there should have been some kind of disciplinary action towards my cousin and I, and that never happened. Never happened. He just, you know, he said, "Okay, we'll pay for the damage," and gave us a ride home, and that was the end of it.
And it was a lesson learned.
No, he never lifted. So, you know, that I always remember that because, you know, that's a teaching that children are really important.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't, because of how you were taught doesn't mean that you have to break their spirit like how yours was broken.
Mm-hmm.
In the residential school. So that, you know, I always remember that. So,
in what ways can we honor our children to foster a sense of community healing?
Traditions, I think we need to observe the traditional rites of passage ceremonies. A lot of times I can always remember the church going against, or even, you know, everything that was natural to us. Our ceremonies were natural. They all, you know, they basically said that our ceremonies were evil and barbaric and things like that, and that we'd all go to the devil because of what we practiced.
Mm-hmm.
So just learning those rites of passage, newborns, first haircut, becoming a woman, I think that's something our people are doing more and more. There's traditions that we had for that. Just the rites of passage. Death is a rite of passage, and I think children being part of that, because I know a lot of people that just don't. You know, death is a fact of life, and you know, it's a stage that people just are too scared, and I think it's probably too scared of their own mortality. What's going to happen to you? Are you going to go the Christian way and you're going to go to hell? Or, you know, those teachings are there. But yeah, for my children, I just say, you know, it's up to you. What do you want? What do you want to believe? Where do you want to go? If you want to go Christian way, then you better learn about it first.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. If that's the way you want to observe. My mother is born again Christian, but I won't follow that route. And I just, you know, give my children the choice. I'm not gonna say it's good or bad. It's up to you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And my youngest is 17, and now it's just more teaching the grandchildren.
If you could give your 25-year-old self advice from the perspective that you have now, what would it be?
Yeah, even though a lot of my education is colonial education, formal education, getting a grade 12, and going that route, getting a bachelor's degree, a master's degree, just to keep on going, but not only having that formal education, colonial education, but our traditional. I think, you know, back when I was 25, there was a lot of elders that were the knowledge keepers, and just having that presence of mind to pay attention to them. And I know a lot of them had some very important messages for the young people, but the young people were, at that time, I know a lot of the young people were just involved in partying with mostly alcohol. Today it's a lot different. You got the alcohol and the drugs and things like that, but back then it wasn't like that. So just listening to the elders at the time and their teachings, and learning that instead of ignoring them and being a young person. Yeah. So that's what I would think about. Learning the language more, seeking out those language speakers, and not being so ashamed of the language or your indigeneity.
Right on. Are there any final messages that you want to put out there?
For the young people?
Sure.
Well, I've taught at the College in New Caledonia for 28 years, and just kind of being that bridge between the non-Indigenous and the Indigenous by teaching them our ways, and all these years bringing in elders with their teachings. I think documenting all of that. I think that right now there needs to be a lot of documentation, because even today with survivors, they're passing on every day. People that I've gone to school with at the residential school the one guy passed away yesterday.
Oh, bless! I'm sorry to hear that.
And and there's another one that's got cancer, and he's dealing with cancer right now, and another cancer and heart attacks and strokes with people my age. And what's their story? They weren't able to tell it, or they're still resistant to telling their story. And, just the next generations need to learn from them. What did they go through? What made them sick? And I'm thinking the residential school is still making them sick, and they're dying from it, but not telling their story.
Yeah. And so sorry, I don't know whether to stop here, because I do have some questions, but I feel like it's starting a new sort of branch of a conversation. I wanted to ask you, do you see the relationship between, the residential school, the colonial, the evolution of the colonial system between the residential school and then what we see now with child welfare?
Yes, a huge connection. They've created the environment in our communities where children were neglected and abused, and making it given the system an excuse to perpetuate that what they intended to do, to get rid of us, complete the genocide. And we still see that system in play. And I say system, it should be systems, because there's a lot of colonial systems in play right now. We're looking at the education system. We're looking at the justice system, the healthcare system. right? These are all colonial, and they all work against us. The justice system, if you're watching it, it's all about the RCMP and what they are doing and not doing, right? And so, being part of that Canadian Human Rights Tribunal, where survivors have taken the RCMP to the Canadian Human Rights because they did not investigate their abuse claims against the Catholic Church in Burns Lake. And so it's really neat to see people having to, they shouldn't have to do that, but Cindy Blackstock took Canada to the Canadian Human Rights and won. So that's something to celebrate, and hopefully this one against the RCMP will be something that we can celebrate, that it changes their system. And I'm sitting doing a trial support for the family of Dale Culver, who was murdered by the police, but the only charges that they're facing is obstruction of justice. But you can see that system in play when you're in the courtroom. The RCMP would send in 8 members of a SWAT team to support the 2 RCMP that are being charged for obstruction. So intimidation. Right?
It's like thinly veiled.
Yeah. So we're talking about systems, systemic racism.
Yes.
And, it's all connected, interconnected, right from the Indian Act to the residential schools to the child welfare system. It's all related.
Absolutely. What advice do you have for somebody who's working in these colonially entrenched systems, who want to make a difference, but they don't know where to start?
A lot of them do come to me and ask me questions like that, and what do I do with my racist brother-in-law who always argues against me about Indigenous issues? And I just said, love them where they're at. He's your family.
Yeah. Regardless,
he's your family, and you have to live with him. And if you're always gonna fight him and hate him, and what's that gonna get you? You're gonna do that for the rest of your life. So you have to love them where they're at, and you're not gonna change them overnight. Maybe something you might change down the road, but then that kind of took some weight off her shoulders, and she was able to move on. And she's still a strong ally for her community. She works for our communities, and she'll always do that. And that's, if you want to help out, be an ally by learning what has happened, and learn the truth, and support where you can support.
Well, I'd like to thank you so much, Bruce, for coming on the show with us, for sharing your knowledge, for viewers and listeners to put it into use into their lives, to help be an ally. And so it really is an honor. If you're still with us, I want to say thank you for watching/listening. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Woven Spirit. If you did, please leave us a like, comment, and share on your social medias. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Woven Spirit, Threads of Wisdom. We understand that the stories shared today may be challenging or triggering. If you need support, please reach out to our crisis line, available 24/7 at 1-800-721-0066. Remember, you don't have to navigate these feelings alone. Support is always here for you.